Yeah.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar today. First, we'd like to extend our gratitude to the speakers, panelists, and all the guests for joining and participating in the coal financing policy and
Recording
climate
in
ambition
progress.
of Germany, South Korea, Japan, and Indonesia. This webinar is proudly presented to you by the Institute of Essential Services Reform. My name is Irwan, and today I'm excited to be your host. Before we start the discussion, please let me introduce you to the housekeeping rules that govern today's event. First, regarding the translation services. As you may know, we will conduct this event in bilingual, English and Indonesia. For you participating in the Zoom applications, we provide a simultaneous translation service. To activate this feature, please click on the globe logo or the interpretation menu that's available in the bottom right corner of your applications. If you are watching live via our YouTube channel, you will hear only the original audio as the ongoing discussion. Kami akan mengadakan acara ini dalam dua bahasa, Inggris dan Indonesia. Untuk Anda yang berpartisipasi melalui Zoom, kami menyediakan layanan terjemahan simultan. Untuk mengaktifkan fitur ini, silakan klik logo globe atau menu interpretasi yang tersedia di kanan bawah aplikasi. Jika Anda menonton langsung melalui saluran YouTube kami, Anda hanya akan mendengar audio asli seperti diskusi yang sedang berlangsung. The second rules regarding microphone settings, all participant multimedia microphones will be muted for moderation purposes. Only panelists and the moderator will be able to activate their microphones. If you would like to speak later on at the question and answer sessions, please raise your hand through the application or contact us through the chat. If the time allows, our moderator will be able to sign you up and activate your microphones. Regarding questions and comments, please type your question or comment in the chat column either in the Zoom application or the YouTube live streams. Please follow this format. First, mention to whom, which panelists or speakers the question is directed at, followed by your name and your institution, and finally, please type in your burning questions that you have. All the presentation materials delivered today will be available and accessible to be downloaded later on the agenda page on iesr.or.id. Hopefully, by the end of the event, you might be able to access them directly. Also, please do join our conversation regarding this topic through your social media by mentioning us at iesr.id at Instagram and Twitter. This event is also live streamed at the ISR Indonesia YouTube channel. Therefore, you may rewatch it later as a video on demand on the aforementioned channel. That's all the housekeeping rules today. Now, I will be handing over the platform to our moderator today, Mbak Lisa Wijayani. Mbak Lisa, the floor is yours.
Terima kasih, thank you Irwan. Good afternoon, selamat siang, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. I'm also very pleased to welcome you to our online seminar of Aligning International Energy Finance Towards the Net Zero Economy. This seminar is in the collaboration with Climate Transparency, an international partnership consisting of think tanks in G20 countries and also support from German Foreign Ministry. My name is Lisa Wijayani. I am Program Manager for Green Economy at the ISR. And this afternoon, I will be moderating today's discussion with the topic of called financing policy and climate ambition of Germany, South Korea, Japan, and Indonesia. Tomorrow, we will have a second session of our online discussion, and we will be discussing on potential risks and also the mitigation efforts of coal exit towards economics and finance in Indonesia. Before we begin to hear a presentation from our speakers today, I would like to invite Mr. Thomas Graf, Chargé d'Affaires of the German Embassy in Indonesia, to give an opening and welcoming remark. Mr. Graf, time and screens is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, and a very good afternoon and a very good morning to everyone. It is my pleasure to take part in this discussion today, which is taking place in a crucial year and less than 60 days before COP26. I would like to thank IESR for hosting today's event and driving forward the discussion on energy transition in Indonesia. In the past few months, net zero announcements have been brought forward by the G7 and other countries, setting important groundwork for the COP26 negotiations. However, we are still far behind the goals of the Paris Agreement to limit global temperature rise at 2 degrees Celsius. Already now, about 2/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions consist of CO2 from fossil fuels and industrial processes. With growing demand for energy, emissions will increase in the future. The recent announcement by the G7 group of states to end direct government support for unabated international thermal coal generation by the end of this year, and an increase of financial support for a rapid acceleration of the energy transition, thus has created a new momentum for climate mitigation. And we hope to find consensus on similarly strong language during the G20 Leaders Summit in October. In the midst of a global crisis, which has had impact on economies worldwide, the announcement of the G7 will obviously put additional strains on countries whose economies are already largely dependent on coal. It will mean a sharp decline in investment in new coal power plants and coal exports, as more countries are abandoning coal from their energy systems, thus causing stranded assets and economic loss. However, we believe this also presents a unique opportunity to transform from high emission-based economies to low carbon, resilient, prosperous, and sustainable economies. In Germany, we have therefore decided to accelerate energy transition at an early stage. We have decided to become net zero already in 2045. Additionally, we have increased our NDC emission reduction target to 65% compared to 1990. The majority of additional reductions will be taken on by the energy sector, which will phase out coal by 2038 or even earlier in 2035. At the same time, our renewable energies target has been increased to 65% by 2030. Climate change, however, is a global emergency and will need global answers and global efforts. Germany, therefore, is committed to its climate finance target. We are also committed to supporting countries like Indonesia in their transition to clean energy. The G7 announcement to provide up to $2 billion to the Climate Investment Fund is one recent example which I would like to underscore. With economic recovery and expanding industrialization, Indonesia will further develop its role as one of the major global growth drivers. However, this also means an increase of infrastructure measures, of electrification and energy demand, and thereby an increase of CO2 emissions in the coming years. Thus, climate change mitigation and energy transition at an early stage must be in the heart of Indonesia's action to economic recovery. We are very much aware of the complex energy situation and the great amount of resources necessary to transform the Indonesian energy sector. Some estimates predict that as much as 1.165 trillion US dollars will be necessary to transition away from coal by 2060. This is a massive undertaking, making wide-ranging international, public and private investment necessary. In order to achieve this, Indonesia will need to create an attractive investment climate to mobilize private investor financing. Regulatory barriers, high subsidies for fossil fuels, and lack of attractive, transparent, and stable tariff regulations create challenges on the way towards a green energy transition. The current energy scenarios, for example, foresee a 38% share of coal-based energy in 2050's energy mix in the most ambitious national long-term strategy scenario. This will, however, in the long run, increase the fiscal burden on Indonesia, as continued investment in coal will lead to stranded assets and an increase of subsidies needed to keep coal competitive in comparison to renewable energies. This is why we are supporting Indonesia in reducing the share of coal-fired energy while rapidly increasing the share of renewable energies, for example, through technical and financial assistance. For example, we are providing multi-level support through investment lending, policy-based lending, and technical assistance, concentrating on hydropower, geothermal plants, and solar photovoltaic systems, and by improving capabilities for grid operation with high shares of variable renewable energies. Moreover, we've been participating in the Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership from the very beginning, which is supporting energy transition in the region, including Indonesia. And we are currently processing our 4 million euro contribution to this partnership to further support this work. In addition, we are planning to increase our support to the World Bank's SMAP program to 10 million euros with a specific focus on countries like Indonesia and issues such as coal transition and fossil fuel subsidy reform. To reach the target of an early coal retirement, close cooperation and exchange among countries and institutions are key. I am therefore looking forward to the discussion today, and I hope we can conclude with some optimistic outcomes regarding how we can further accelerate energy transition in Indonesia and worldwide. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Graf, for the warming opening remarks. I agree with you. We hope that this discussion will accelerate the collaboration and cooperation between Indonesia and other countries to work together in reaching the net zero economy. Then we will have the next one is the congratulatory speech from Ms. So-Young Lee, who is a member of the Korean National Assembly from Democratic Party of South Korea. However, as she is not available to join us today, Ms. So-Young Lee will deliver her speech in a video recording. Then I would like to ask my colleague, ISR team, to please play the video recording of Ms. So-Young Lee.
안녕하세요. 이소영 의원입니다. 저는 대한민국 국회에서 국회의원으로 일하고 있고 국회에서 에너지 정책을 담당하는 산업통상자원 중소벤처기업위원회에서 활동하고 있습니다. 그리고 제가 속한 정당에서 탄소중립 정책을 담당하는 위원회의 간사를 맡고 있기도 합니다. 오늘 인도네시아 탈석탄 금이용과 관련된 이 의미 있는 세미나를 개최해 주시고 또 이렇게 초대해 주신 IESR 그리고 Climate Transparency에 감사드립니다. 1.5도씨 목표를 달성하기 위해서 탈석탄은 너무나 당연한 가장 먼저 결단해야 되는 문제일 것입니다. 그리고 대한민국도 마찬가지고 동남아시아에서 계획되어 있는 신규 석탄화력 발전소가 모두 지어진다면 우리는 기후위기를 막을 기회를 완전히 놓치게 될 것이라고 하는 세계은행 총재의 예전에 코멘트가 있기도 했었죠. 그래서 저도 지난 수년 동안 한국에서의 탈석탄, 그리고 동남아시아의 신규 석탄화력 발전소에 대한민국 공적금융기관이나 공기업에 자금이 들어가지 않게끔 하는 여러 가지 활동과 노력을 해왔습니다. 작년에 인도네시아 자와나인텐을 막기 위해서 많은 노력을 했고 해외 석탄 금융을 금지하는 법안까지 발의했음에도 불구하고 그 사업 자체는 막지 못했습니다. 너무 안타깝게 생각을 합니다. 그러나 그 싸움의 과정에서 대한민국의 탈석탄 금융 선언을 이끌어내기도 했고 한전과 삼성물산 등 여러 기업들이 해외 석탄화력 발전소를 짓는 데에 참여하지 않겠다는 선언을 하기도 했습니다. 여전히 대한민국 국내에 신규 석탄화력 발전소가 건설되고 있는 중이긴 하지만 석탄화력을 줄여나가는 정책 방향에 대해서는 점차 확고해지고 있는 상황이기도 합니다. 상황은 시급한데 우리 변화의 속도는 아직 많이 느립니다. 더 신발끈을 동여매고 가열찬 노력이 필요한 때가 아닌가 합니다. 저도 대한민국 국회에서 한국 내의 탈석탄 그리고 우리 세계적인 탈석탄을 위해서 제 역할을 더 열심히 하고 더 노력하겠습니다. 오늘 이 자리에 모여주신 많은 분들께서도 함께 해주시면 좋겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Okay, I think the video has completed. Now we are almost reaching to the main session of our seminar today. But before, I would like to ask Mr. Fabi to give an introduction and a little bit background of our discussion today before we go on to our speakers to present their presentation and share their experience. Mrs. Pak Fabi, could you please start? Yes, we still cannot hear you.
Thank you, Lisa, and good afternoon, good morning to all participants. Again, welcome to the series seminar aligning international finance toward net zero emission hosted by ISR in collaboration with Climate Transparency and our partners IGES and from Japan and SFOC from South Korea. In these two-day events, we will looking at a number of issues. First, in this the first day, we will look at this the experience of coal transition in 3 countries, and tomorrow we will discuss about the risks of energy transitions and also the financial implications of the coal. And I'm very happy that ISR has the opportunity to host this important meeting because it's very timely and very relevant with our discussions in the country today. Ladies and gentlemen, the IPCC AR6 report sends a quote to all of us that we must increase our ambition and ramping up our actions to avoid climate crisis. We have a very little time to reach a Paris Agreement's goal. Luckily that in Indonesia, in the last 6 months, policy discussion on decarbonization is accelerating. And recently, Indonesia government has declared to reach net zero emission by 2060 or sooner. And also, what is important that our president has ordered our utility PLN to build no new coal plants built beyond the 35 gigawatt completions, which hopefully will be complete before 2025. Also, the interesting development is that our state-owned utility PLN actually has stated that that they will not award any new award a new coal-fired power plant development after 2022, and they have draw a coal phase-out plan. I think PLN is the first in the region that has that target, and we delighted and appreciate this development. Japan and Korea have committed to decarbonize, as we mentioned, as we have heard earlier, self-coal plants in the near future, while a country like Germany has stated to phase out coal entirely before 2036. Hopefully, it can be also earlier than 2036. And in Indonesia context right now, to reach decarbonization, hopefully also before 2060, is that we have to implement some measures in this decade. So it won't take too long, but in this decade, first that we need to ramp up renewable energy development. I think it's very important. We have to meet our energy demand, but at the same time, we have to reduce carbon intensity of our energy system. Second, also we at the same time that we have to start reduce coal-fired power plant, thermal power plants, yeah, and it has to be done also this decade. We need to strengthen the grid infrastructure so it able to host high share of renewables, in particular variable renewables. And lastly, it is also very important that to mobilize finance for supporting large-scale renewables and also to cover early retirement of coal power plants, if any. So that's, I think, 4 measures that is needed for Indonesia to be able to be in the pathways to reach the pathway of 1.5 degrees. Well, Korea and Japan have stated to no longer finance overseas coal project. Well, if you look at these two countries, actually are the main source of coal financing in Indonesia in the last decade. Coal project in Indonesia is vastly supported by investor and also public institution from Japan and South Korea. So we are looking, actually, this commitment materialized that there is no more funding for coal projects starting this year. But what is also important is how international finance should be shifted to accelerate energy transition globally, in particular in Indonesia. And we hope that Japan, Korea, Germany are keen to support renewable energy efficiency projects, grid modernizations, as well as capacity development of Indonesia policymakers, utilities, and civil society. Also, that support is needed for Indonesia to address social and economic impact of coal exit. That we know that with the energy transition, we will not be able to produce coal, and it will affect it a lot to coal producing region. So this impact could be mitigated through economic diversification plan, which we currently have not yet exist in Indonesia. But we hope that we can work together to make this economic transition plan will be available for this also coal producing region to address the impact of the energy transition. Also, we need to learn the experience on planning the coal transition. And this is very important in order to mitigate social economic impact, but at the same time maximizing the benefit from the transition. Finally, I would like to thank all the panelists and speakers today. Herr Banterbusch, if I'm not misspell your name, Herr Thomas Graf, also Pak Basilio from Kemenko Marves, Pak Dr. Medrilsam from Bapenas, and also big appreciation to my colleague Florian from Climate Transparency Secretariat, and Jujin Kim from SFOC, and Kentaro from IGES. Thank you all, and I hope you enjoyed the seminar today. Back to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Fabi, for explaining such detailed information on the connection between energy transition and the alignment of energy finance to reach net zero economy, until how we need the economic transformation to actually be able to reach all the goals. So now I think we can start to listen presentation from our speakers. We have already 5 speakers here. We have Mr. Ulrich Banterbusch, Deputy Director General, Chairman, Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. Good afternoon, sir. Jujin Kim, Managing Director from Solutions for Our Climate as FOC South Korea. And Kentaro Tamura, Director of Climate and Energy, Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, IGES of Japan. Again, from Indonesia, we have Pak Medrilsam from Bapenas and Pak Basilio Diaz Araujo from Coordinating Ministry for Investment and Maritime Affairs. Now, I would like to start to give the floor to Mr. Ulrich to share on the climate and energy outcomes from G7 summit. I think we'll give you around 10 minutes if you can to share your information and experience. And then for the audience, if you have questions, please share your questions in the chat box. Please, Mr. Ulrich, you may have the time and screen.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon and good morning to everybody. Thank you very much, Lisa, for your kind introduction, as well to my colleague Thomas Graf, and of course to Fabi for his encouraging words that underlined how crucial developments are in this upcoming decade. Let me kind of step a little bit back and look what is going on. And if we look back, let's say the last 10 years, we have to say there has been a lot of discussion, but when it came to real implementation, be it in Europe, be in the States, be in other countries, we did not do the best job. But if I look ahead of what is going on, then my impression is that now many governments, businesses, industry leaders, NGOs really understood what is at stake. And I can certainly say, with regard to the developments in Europe, this decade will not be a lost decade as regards combating climate change. Things are getting done now, and we are getting very serious. And in this context, of course, it's important that we have now a lot of commitments from many governments towards climate neutrality towards 2050. That is a very important signal. And it's also, I think, a good signal that a country like Germany has decided that it will reach climate neutrality by 2045, and that is now fixed in law. But what is even, I would say, more important, that we have seen the change in the US policies, and with the new Biden administration, the US is back on track to seriously combating climate change and rejoining the Paris Agreement. That is, in my view, a very, very crucial signal, which is of utmost importance. In Europe, we have seen now a development that leaders have committed to climate neutrality, and now the new laws are on the table. And that has, of course, a big, big impact on all of us, because the European framework on concrete targets for combating climate change are, of course, a framework for our national policies. We can always be more ambitious, that's of course understood, but Europe as a global player does play a decisive role in this context. And we all have seen, we have seen, of course, the new IPCC report, but what was going on in Europe this summer in terms of catastrophes with regard to weather, it has been so extreme that the whole population in Europe is, I think, now very aware what is at stake. And I'm not talking only about the fires in the Mediterranean region, in particular in Greece or Turkey. We have seen also very bad fires in Spain, in Italy. And in our country, in Germany, we had these torrential floods 8 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago in two of our federal countries, where more than 160 people died. That is unprecedented in a country like Germany, and nobody in that region would have ever expected something like that. So when it comes now to our current election, we have a national election end of September. All these questions of how to effectively combat climate change plays a very, very crucial role. In this context, I think it's of utmost importance, Lisa, what you have kind of asked me to present and dwell a little bit on, is how the G7 are aligned as a group of countries, like-minded countries with regard to climate change. And the central message of this year's G7 is that the G7 as the old, so-called old industrialist countries are now again aligned to jointly combat climate change and reach greenhouse gas neutrality by 2050. And I think what is so crucial in this context is that, of course, if you look at, for example, per capita emissions, then, of course, US, Germany, and others are ahead of countries like China and India. But in the discussions globally, very often it's stated how much, in absolute terms, China is emitting and other developing countries or emerging countries. And then the question of who can take what responsibility is a little bit blurred, because I think we have to make it as G7 clear that we understand our historical responsibility. But of course, at the same time, it is true that even if the G7 would do everything to combat climate change without the substantial contribution of all emerging economies, we will not reach our goals. So as regards historical responsibility, things are clear, but today where we stand, we are all sitting in one boat, we are living on one planet, and therefore we have to cooperate. And therefore seminars like you are organizing are so crucial and important, because it is, of course, very complicated and difficult in countries like Indonesia, in India, to get rid of coal, reduce it at a more rapid pace. But therefore, it is important that countries like the G7 have committed to contribute substantially financially to your efforts. And at the same time, they have committed to make it clear and terminate financing coal projects around the globe via their institutions, their banks, or public institutions. So this, I think, is a very, very important message. And in addition, I think it's extremely important that these countries have committed to increase their financing. Germany by 25 will yearly contribute $6 billion US dollars to combat climate change. And I think this is also a very, very important message. In addition, the G7 have committed by 2030 to overwhelmingly decarbonize their power systems in 2030. That is for Germany a challenge, as you know, because we are phasing out nuclear power latest in 2022. So then all our nuclear power stations will be turned off. And that is, of course, CO2-free electricity. And therefore, our time to decarbonize the power system is a little bit more extended. But the good news is, as the European framework develops, the ambitions as regards the emission trading schemes, the cap, it will be raised. And that has an effect that coal power production in Europe, the price for that will rise. And therefore, gas is going to be much more competitive in years to come. And therefore, we expect that the phase of coal, which is legally terminated in 38, will happen in reality by 2030, probably, roundabout. But that is what the pundits, the experts are predicting with regard to the German situation, that it will happen much more quicker than we have put in law. And in addition, Fabi, you mentioned something that I would also like to stress. We have to, of course, speed up the development of energy, of renewable energies, no doubt about it, to decarbonize the power sector. But as important as that are the energy efficiency policies, because we have to reduce energy consumption in an economical manner, of course. So energy efficiency projects at the same time are also extremely crucial. And that holds true in particular for a country like Germany in the Northern Hemisphere, where energy consumption of the heating sector is absolutely crucial. And there are many other countries in the Northern Hemisphere. And their gas and fossil fuels play right now a very dominant role. So that is something in our countries we have to work on very, very seriously. And I can only assure you that we are doing that. So the so-called energy transition in our country, in our region, has also to be accompanied by a heating transition. It's not only electricity, heating is absolutely crucial. Just to give you a couple of numbers, the energy consumption of Germany is 2,500 terawatt, and 1,300 of this is heat, and 600 electricity, and 600 transport. Just to give you an impression of the challenge that is in front of us. We are, I think, all in agreement that we have to work with regard to the electricity sector to a transition away from unabated coal, both in G7 and worldwide. And therefore, in Germany, it's absolutely clear that we will end the financing, as I have already mentioned, of unabated coal production. There is no doubt that we have also to discuss this in the G20 context, which is, I think, a very, very relevant fora to form new policies and consensus. But I want to come back to one point I just mentioned earlier. We have to avoid in this context, blaming anybody, because I said we sit in the same boat. It's not about who emitted first and who has now the right, to catch up in industrial development. That's an important aspect of it, because there lies, I think, the financial obligation for the G7 countries to support climate-friendly policies in emerging economies. But in the end, without a firm commitment of countries like Indonesia, India, and China also develop a phase out of coal-fired electricity production, there is no possibility. We have no chance really to reach our climate change targets, because these countries are huge. They have a solid industrial base by now, and they are, of course, in absolute terms, emitting a lot of CO2 emissions. In that sense, I'm happy that, in the last communique of the G20, at least the compromise on was found. But if you look into the text, it is, of course, not, very substantial. And it is important that the colleagues and the governments in the G20 context sit together and discuss these things and try to develop joint solutions. And I think that is the value added of the G20 format, that, industrialized countries, the old guys, the new guys around the block, which is not the right impression, I would say. Maybe that was the impression for 10 years, because China is a global player that affects all economies on a worldwide scale, like the US, and it will further grow. The Indians will come and follow China. They are also a huge economy. And of course, Indonesia is also a very, very strong player. And if you go to Latin America, without Brazil, without decent policies there, in particular as regards deforestation, we won't make it. So in that sense, I really, really look forward to the discussions we and you have in this seminar. And I really, really want to encourage you, in particular our Indonesian colleagues, to sensitize the public, to influence policymakers, because I admire your work, and you are certainly on a very, very promising and right track. Though it's, of course, a very, very, let's say, tedious fight against coal that costs a lot of energy in terms of energy of your personal energy, but I think it's worthwhile. So thank you very much. I'm honored to be in this seminar, and I wish our discussions good results. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benterbusch. Since you can only stay for around 30 minutes, if I may ask you 2 questions, then you can just answer it right away. Again, thanks for flagging the need for international cooperation in combating climate change. I agree that that the global cooperation is needed. But I'm wondering, the G7, will they discuss about how the energy transition will also support the economic recovery, not only in G7 countries, but also in emerging countries like Indonesia? And the second question is, Indonesia will be the chair of G20 next year. Will you have any input on how Indonesia can better lead the G20 countries in terms of combating climate change and also expediting the economic recovery together? So I think that's all my 2 cents, my 2 questions, if you may answer it.
Yeah, thank you very much. With regard to the energy transition and the recovery, I think the link is not too strong, because what you need in terms of recovery in economic terms is really something where you can, in short term, speed up consumption. But the investment in energy is more longer term. But there's a big advantage in this crisis situation is that governments normally put a lot of money on the table to speed up developments. That has happened in Germany. For example, in the context of the recovery, the government earmarked 9 billion euros for hydrogen projects, green hydrogen projects. And that we could get that money only in the crisis situation. Otherwise, it would have been considerably less. So in that sense, the recovery is the crisis is an opportunity to reserve funds which you spend in future. But in the short term, when it comes to really creating and restart the economy, I think the energy sector is not in the strongest position, you know, to in the short run to give the biggest benefit. But it is a very good opportunity to design policies that need finance for a longer term. I think because in the crisis situation you can mobilize funds much more easily. I think that's the important link. With regard to your question on the G20, I would say it's more a political kind of view that I have here, because, and it has to do with what I just also kind of tried to get across. We have to avoid in the G20 context to build up false fronts. Yeah, with Trump, it was clear that the front, you know, was, you know, black and white. And we have to understand that we are all in the same boat. So, you know, the old developed countries have, you know, to understand their responsibility, but also the new developing countries, the emerging countries, who are, of course, in a complex situation, should not simply say, we need to emit more, you have done it before, and now, you know, it's our term and our right to, you know, emit whatever is necessary to catch up industrial development. That these kind of false fronts are still there, and they have been, you know, reinforced through the Trump administration. We have to much more develop our joint picture, our joint responsibility, and see that these 20 countries are the decisive countries to change the track regarding our fight against climate change. If these 20 countries won't make it, we are not able to make it. And the rest will follow these 20 countries. And I think if you base your policy suggestions on that, and also in your context, you know, as an emerging economy, talk to China, Brazil, South Africa, and all the others on this basis, and try to, you know, get an understanding of what the challenge is. Then I think the formulation of concrete deliverables for the summit will be easier. But you need that kind of common understanding as a basis for this group. And I don't think that the G20 at this point in time has that understanding. If I go to Russia, if I go to Saudi Arabia, for example, name just two, not a shame, but just to say that is a long way to go. And these kind of things are the decisive prerequisites for any sensible deliverable that you may reach at your summit.
All right. Thank you very much for your comments and your inputs, Mr. Van der Busch. Well noted that. I think, yeah, we just go on to our next speaker. We already have here Eugene Kim from SFOC Korea, who will share on the South Korea's pledge on carbon neutrality and the halting of coal investment. So Eugene, please, the time and screen is now yours.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And above all, I thank Climate Transparency and IESR for inviting me to this event today. It's a very big privilege. I understand we're talking today about international energy finance. I must start with a very recent announcement by our government, our president, which was made at the US Leaders Summit, which took place in April. I believe the Indonesian president was also invited to that summit. Our president was as well, and he stated clearly in his speech that South Korea will end all public financing for new overseas coal-fired power plants. Of course, several months before that, our financing of coal power plants have stopped, but he has clarified that there and has made similar speeches after that several times. I leave the excerpt of that speech here, and I will move on to my next slide. In today's presentation, I will discuss not only about the coal finance issue, but also, as Lisa mentioned, where our discussions on our 2030 NDC target is, and how that relates to our carbon neutrality 2050 target, and where coal power stands and what kind of difficulties our government is experiencing with phasing out coal power. Some may think that the announcement that I just mentioned by our president was something coming top down. No, it was not. It was more a bottom-up announcement. I'd like to, even before our president made the no more coal finance announcement, more than 90 Korean financial institutions announced to have a coal finance restriction policy, mainly saying that we will no longer finance new coal power plants. However, just 4 years ago, we were financing a coal power plant in Indonesia. Cirebon 2 was one of that. And around when that project was started, our criticism of coal financing appeared, especially in our legislature around that time. The next year in 2018, we financed another coal project in Vietnam. But at the same year, there were 2 pension funds making the first start in a long line of no coal finance announcements. 2 pension funds announced that they will no longer commit finance coal. 2019, 3 more made the same announcement. And then 2020, everything exploded. In 2020, with the COVID crisis, a very big national debate on whether the Korean government, which has recently announced that it will do a Green New Deal, be the right thing to finance a big coal project in Indonesia, the Java 9 and 10 coal project in Surabaya, and the Vung 2 project in Vietnam. This led to several presidential level discussions. In May, there was also a very contentious debate inside the cabinet. In October and September, there were big discussions in the presidential office and the National Assembly. And eventually, our government decided that this is no longer something that we should be doing. And in that process, companies like Samsung or KEPCO all made commitments to no longer finance coal power. And I think that was also mentioned by Soyeon Lee, the speaker of our governing party. And with that, and with this atmosphere, so many financial institutions have been making no coal financing commitments. Several of those which have also business presences in Indonesia. And it's been difficult to count the number of banks that have been making no more coal finance announcements. However, this is just one part of the picture. Our financing sector is severely exposed to the oil and gas investments as well. We see a huge exposure of our financial institutions to the oil and gas sector, and I think this will be a problem in the future as climate policy development discussions develop. This here is just a straight line of where our emissions stand right now and where it should be in 2050. Our emissions are at around 700 million tons as of 2018, 2017. And if you draw a straight line down, this is how the line would look like. Our NDC is currently at minus 24.4 from 2017. 536 million tons is the figure. If you draw a straight line, if you follow the orange line will pass by around 450 million tons in 2030, which is about minus 37.5%. I think this minus 37.5% will be the bottom line. I think, and according to the government as well, this will probably be the bottom line of our NDC ambition. So this will be probably the minimum. At the same time, according to another Germany-based think tank called Climate Analytics, the Paris-aligned NDC that our government could have is going to be about 43 to 59%. I personally believe our NDC will drop somewhere between this 43% figure and 37.5% figure. And our government will make that announcement in October, and we'll have to see. Interestingly, the NDC ambition in the political arena has been growing. In May, our Minister of Environment was not willing to comment on where our NDC should be. And above all, and many other organizations in the government were saying that, it's not changing the NDC is not something good. And then you have several very influential political figures coming in, governors, party leaders, and eventually government also saying that our NDC should be more than that. It should be around 37%, 40%, even 50%. There have been also allegations that it should be 50%. So the ambition has been slowly crawling up, And a lot of people here anticipate that our NDC will be somewhere around 40%. What will happen if our NDC is enhanced to that level? That's a question. And then we actually did a study with a university here in Korea with the support of European governments, where our power sector will be if our NDC would be reduced, as in the orange line I just showed in 2 previous slides, in one of my previous slides. What will happen if our NDC is about 40% or 37%? It will mean that coal power will be less than 10%. Renewables should be at around 40%. By 2040, gas power will practically have to be gone. So, I mean, which means that the answer is pretty obvious. By around 2030, but coal should be out of our system, and by around 2040, gas should be out around our system. Of course, this is something very difficult to digest for our power sector regulators, but it's becoming a more and more evident reality. Having mentioned coal, I would like to show where coal stands, how coal power policy developments have happened in our country. Just 5 years ago, 11 coal power plants representing a 15% increase in our emissions were commissioned. Around the same time, 7 units around the same time, about 2016 to 2018, began construction and received government financing. So just until 2018, our government was still allowing new coal power plants to go. Of course, around that time, just like Indonesia did recently in July, I believe, the government also announced to permit no more new coal power plants as well around that time. The atmosphere changed, especially from subnational governments. Chungnam province, which is a province that has about half of our coal power fleet, about 18 gigawatts of coal power plants exist in that province, announced that it will join the Powering Past Coal Alliance. And the following year, in 2019, a lot of coal power plant retrofit projects were canceled. And this led to the belief that coal power plants will no longer be more than 30 years old in Korea. And following that, several other coal provinces in Korea joined the Powering Past Coal Alliance. We have now 8 provinces that represent about 80% of our population that are members of the Powering Past Coal Alliance, which kind of shows you the general very acceptable sentiment of no coal in Korea. Coal is not a partisan issue in Korea. Opposition against coal is pretty much general and universal in Korea. In 2020, Ban Ki-moon, a government council led by Ban Ki-moon, recommends a 2040 or 2045 coal phase-out date to the government. And this year, with the new net zero targets announced by our president and NDC discussions coming on, the fate of our last remaining coal power projects is a very contentious issue. I think this graph here will show you where our 2050 pathway discussions stand. These are kind of like 3 pathways that our government has shown for our net zero as a reference to our net zero discussion. These are not confirmative pathways; these are just reference scenarios. And one scenario, and you can see that the power sector is the most contentious area. You have one scenario that has coal and gas in 2050. You have one scenario that has no coal and no gas in 2050. And you have one scenario that still has gas, and it kind of shows you where the emissions are. And this kind of shows you how difficult the issue of changing our power mix, how difficult the issue, especially of canceling our last remaining new coal power plants, has been for our government. But it looks like our government is heading toward that direction. Internal combustion engines has also been a contentious issue in our government. Biomass generation, and how much we can rely on carbon sinks, especially if the carbon sinks will be used for biomass generation. That has also been a very important topic in our 2050 net zero discussions, and also how much we can rely on CCS, and which includes not just domestic CCS but also overseas CCS, has been a very important topic in our climate policy discussions. So we'll have to see where this goes. Anyways, as I mentioned, the fate of our last remaining new coal power plants is I think, the #1 issue in our climate policy discussions right now, especially with the 2050 net zero discussions going on and the NDC discussions going on. We tried, I mean, and here is some figures provided by our team and along with a kind of accounting firm, a reputable accounting firm in Korea. This kind of mirrors the German experience, where you had a coal phase out date and you auctioned the transition funds to the coal power plants in consideration of closing. We try to evaluate the value of the last remaining coal power plants that were permitted and under construction in Korea. These last coal power stations would cost $3 to $4 billion just for construction, and a lot of them have spent almost that much amount of money until now just being constructed at that level. They're like 50% constructed or 70% constructed coal power plants. Interestingly, the fair market value put inside financial models, rendered from financial models, is much lower than the construction costs involved. Especially this happens because of stronger climate regulations, greenhouse gas regulations, and stronger renewable energy targets. Because of that, the fair market value of coal power plants that we are finding out is much lower, maximum $1 billion, or as small as minus $1.3 billion appears to be the fair market value of the coal power plants, of one coal power plant that is at issue right now. So our government, compensating these last coal power plants in a most effective way, I think the German government did a very good job of that, is going to be a challenge that will come up in the future. So this is what I have for today. Once again, thank you very much to IESR and Climate Transparency for inviting me, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Jujin. It's really interesting to see how Korea has been increasing ambition to reach carbon neutrality, especially in reducing coal through coal phase out in South Korea. Then we move on to Japan. Actually, I have some questions, but maybe I will let our audience to share their questions in the chat box. I hope audience here have burning questions to ask later on as we reflect from the presentation and information from Germany, from South Korea and Japan, and later on from Indonesian government. I would like now to ask Kentaro Tamura from IGES Japan. Kentaro, I would like to let you to share about Japan's contribution in achieving carbon neutrality. Please, the time and the screen is now yours.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So good afternoon and good morning to everyone. This is Kentaro Tamura from IGS. First of all, I'd like to appreciate, Institute for Essential Service Reform and Climate Transparency for having me today. This is a great honor to me to have share some my view on the Japan's approach for carbon neutrality and also 2030 emission reduction target, and also some contribution to the Asian countries. Okay, this figure shows the historical trend of Japan's GHG emissions and also emission reduction target. Currently, Japan's NDC is 26% reduction. And also Japan has a long-term target of 80% reduction in 2050, and also having achieving net zero as early as possible in the second half of this century. These are current official target. But in October last year, Prime Minister Suga, he declares a carbon neutrality or net zero emission by 2050. And also in April this year, he declared a new 2030 target. That means 46% reduction, and also some higher goal of the 50%. So currently, a new Japan's NDC drafting, and then I think hopefully before the COP26, new updated NDC and also long-term strategy will be submitted to the UNFCCC. And also now at the domestic level, there's the discussion about how to achieve this target is it become very contentious. Then now we have draft strategic energy plan. So this strategic energy plan is a key policy document in Japan because this provides kind of general guidance, a long-term guidance of national energy policy. And it also provides some how to achieve this 2030 target and also 2050 carbon neutrality. So now we have draft. And then, so I just introduced some key feature of this draft energy strategic energy plan. So as I mentioned, this draft provides some perspective for carbon neutrality in 2050, which have energy conservation first, and also decarbonization power sector, and electrification in all sectors, and also R&D, especially hydrogen-related technology innovation for industrial sector, and also DACs and BECs, and some reforestation for offsetting residual emissions. These are key pillars for 2050 carbon neutrality in Japan. And also, if you look at this energy sector, the all options are still under the consideration. I mean, the renewable energy is seen as a top priority, but at the same time, the government emphasizes decarbonizing thermal power plant by carbon capture and utilization strategy and hydrogen ammonia. And also, this bit ambiguous statement, but the still government continuously use nuclear power plant as a necessary scale, and also continue to develop new generation of the reactors while reducing dependence on nuclear as much as possible. So this bit ambiguous statement, but this is what written in this carbon strategic energy plan. So as you can see, the focus is on the industry-oriented technology innovation. And interestingly, a few reference to some specific discussion on the demand side. I mean, especially so new lifestyle or that kind of things. It's on very discussion is very much limited. Then regarding 2030 target, this strategic energy plan also provide power supply mix for 2030. So this figure showed this is a historical trend of power supply mix in Japan. And also this bar represent kind of outlook for 2030 power mix under this draft strategic energy plan. That means this is consist with 26 target reduction target. This right bar show the previous strategic energy plan discuss provide this 2030 power mix, which consists with 26% emission reduction target. So you can show, you can see the more ambitious target obviously lead to more ambitious plan for power mix. So now non-fossil fuel will account for 6% by 2030. So we can compare with this 44% it become more ambitious. But at the same time, this ambitious policy for power mix, 2030 power mix, also pose many challenges. For example, nuclear. There are, many, I think, experts pointed out that is it really realistic to see that nuclear power plant to account for 20 or 20% of the energy power mix by 2030. And also renewable energy, you can see big increase, but there are two camps. One camp say is not realistic, but the other camp say this is not enough. So now it's in a huge discussion to how to achieve this power mix is ongoing in Japan. So next few slides, I'd like to discuss some discussion on coal. Okay, this graph the figure show the role of coal in 2030 power mix. So this one is current 2019's figure. So around 30% of power mix it come from the coal, and high efficiency coal plant, inefficient coal plant, and captive coal plant. That means the coal plant for self-consumption for electricity. So under this previous strategic energy plan, they say that the share of coal in the power mix will decrease from around 30% to 26%, mainly through the phasing out of inefficiency coal plant. But now we have the 46% reduction target. So this draft strategic plan required further reduction to the 90% of the coal-fired power plant in power mix. So further reduction is expected, but still specific policy measures are still under the consideration. So this is a discussion about domestic coal. And next slide shows Japan's stance on international coal-related asset. As we already discussed, Japanese government decided to stop public support for new unabated international coal power plant coal project, mainly reflecting the G7 communique. And also private banks and trading company also started withdrawing from international coal-related asset. This table shows some current decision by Japanese trading company to sell stake on the coal-related asset, which included Mitsui Corporation decision to sell stake in Indonesia's Payton thermal power plant to Thai company. So I think now Japan already started a shift in their position on the international coal-related asset. But at the same time, there is some growing interest in ammonia and the hydrogen fired power plant power generation in Japan. So basically, as ammonia and hydrogen do not emit CO2 when they are burned, so they are expected to play significant role in decarbonization power sector. So Japan's green growth strategy show roadmap of ammonia and hydrogen. So by 2030, to establish ammonia co-burning technology, 20% for coal power plant, and later hydrogen co-burning for LNG gas power plant. And also establish international supply chain for hydrogen ammonia. This should be done by 2030, and around 2030 and afterwards, they are expected to start exporting ammonia co-burning technology to Southeast Asia and other regions. And around 2050, they establish 100% ammonia and hydrogen burning technology. So these are roadmap. And also this table on the left show that the current Japanese companies international project on hydrogen ammonia production and transport. So as you can see, the kind of growing momentum for ammonia and hydrogen project. So there are several reasons behind this growing interest. So first, they expected that a Japanese company can take the lead in the technology development ammonia and hydrogen co-burning. We felt already lost the competition for the solar panel and also wind against European and Chinese company. So this technology is a new kind of technology frontier for Japan in this decarbonized society. And also these technology can help to maintain existing hydrocarbon-based energy system infrastructure in Japan. So this is another reason why they also show some interest. And also, this technology can contribute to decarbonization of coal and gas dominated power sector in Asia. This in turn means that there is huge market for this technology. So according to METI, the estimation, Ministry of Economy and Trade and Industry, they estimated that around 5 billion Japanese yen and around 4.6 billion US dollar market if 1% of coal-fired power plants introduce coal-burning technology in Southeast Asia. So these are, I think, some reason against behind why Japanese government and also companies show growing interest in this ammonia and hydrogen. But on the other hand, there's some caution. So first of all, how cost effective are they? So currently, the hydrogen is very expensive, and also ammonia producing current conventional way of producing ammonia is highly energy intensive. So if make it carbon free, definitely CCS required. So that means the additional cost. And also in case of green hydrogen ammonia, to produce green hydrogen ammonia, renewable energy are used to produce hydrogen. Then again, hydrogen used to generate power. And in case of green ammonia, renewable energy used to generate hydrogen and add nitrogen to produce ammonia. Then this ammonia will be burned for generating power. So these are a bit, there are more simpler alternatives, such as simply directly using linear energy plus battery for power sector. So can they, the Japanese government company setting target hydrogen and cost of hydrogen ammonia can compete with natural gas or coal. But inevitably, these cost of hydrogen and ammonia inevitably higher than linear energy, electricity. So I'm very much skeptical. How can they compete with linear energy itself? So this is kind of one caveat. The other one is more fundamental. That means how green are blue hydrogen and blue ammonia. A recent study of life cycle assessment of blue hydrogen and blue ammonia indicated they are not so green. So this should be taken into account when we discuss green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, and blue ammonia. So this is a summary. So more ambitious emission reduction target can lead to a more ambitious plan for power mix. So which in turn pose a lot of challenges. However, such challenges need to be overcome if we want to deeper emission cut anyway. So I think more ambitious target is definitely necessary to moving forward. And also Japan reduced share of coal power further and stop new unabated international coal project. And at the same, maybe the other coin of the same, other side of the same coin, Japanese government, Japanese companies show increasing interest in hydrogen and ammonia co-burning technology, which can contribute to decarbonization of power sector in Japan and also other Asian countries. But there are caveat in terms of especially cost effectiveness and greenness. So it is necessary to carefully consider how CO2-free hydrogen ammonia will be used in the future. But I personally think it's not for power sector, but for other sector like industry and transportation. So that is, I think, yeah, that is my end of presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kentaro. It's interesting to know about Japan ambition on net zero emissions, especially by accelerating the innovation and technology, and how Japan will invest in Southeast Asia in terms of hydrogen and ammonia. I think we are almost running out of time, and we're coming to the very interesting session now to hear from the Indonesian government, from Pak Medrelzam and Pak Basilio. I know both of you have to stay at around 4 p.m. So I would like to ask Pak Medrelzam first to share on Indonesia climate ambition in reaching net zero economy, and then we'll hear from Pak Basilio afterwards. Silakan Pak Medrelzam.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. If I may share as well my presentations, please, Areta, if belum ya? Halo? Bentar. Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Pak Febi from ISR, that has already provided me some opportunities to explain the titles in this slide, Indonesia Climate Ambitions to Achieve Net Zero Emissions. And thank you very much, colleagues. Good afternoon and greetings to everyone around the world. In this opportunity, I would like to share this progress about our ambitions. Please, next. But before I explain further about our net zero emissions, I think I would like to underline the importance of the way we think about our climate and our development. It seems to me that there are a lot of movement right now in the climate change context will be separated with the development context. And I think this is not correct. And I believe, I think we are in Bapanas believe that climate and economic targets should not be decoupled. We have to see that we have to minimize the trade-offs between the economic targets and also our emission reductions ambitions as well. So because we have to see that both has to be achieved as well. I can understand that the developed countries really would like to pursue the comprehensive approach and more global efforts to reduce the emissions, but of course we need to consider as well about the progress in our economy, and I believe all countries also consider about their economy as well. So that's why in our planning development plans, basically we have already considered this climate and economic targets to become our macroeconomic framework. So when we consider about our economic targets, of course, climate is part of it. Yeah, and this is also in line with Article 3.4 under UNFCCC. I think I encourage you to read this Article 3.4 of the UNFCCC conventions, because here in this article, it is mentioned very clearly that we have to integrate any countermeasures on climates to development national development program. So that means that there is a very clear intentions in the conventions that all climate measures has to be integrated with development measures as well. So in our context, in our Indonesian situations, basically we have already have more much better climate projections, and we know that we will be having a very significant impact. We will be experiencing a very significant impacts to because of this climate change, and this will influence our economy, not just for the futures. Right now, we have been impacted by this climate change, and as mentioned by colleague earlier, that we need to consider as well about the impact of COVID-19, because this also influence our development path, and like or dislike, this will also influence our climate ambitions as well. Because if we do not change our development path, so then if we just using the business as usual approach, so then we believe that we could not achieve our climate ambition. So in Indonesia, as mentioned by previous colleagues, that we currently are doing our economic recovery programs, which is more heavily on the consumption side, more on the demand sides. But of course, we have already designed plans our developments. Once this COVID-19 is deliberately gone, so we have already prepared our transformations, economic transformations process, which of course will rely upon the more on supply sides. So then of course this economic transformations process, which rely on the supply side, we really would like to see that the transformation on the supply side in a much more greener way. So that's why in our economic transformations planning that we are doing at the moment, we really would like to encourage for the green economy to be one of the major transformations that we are going to have. And of course, this green economy will be considering both about the economic targets and also our environment objectives as well. And in Indonesia, please next, we use low carbon development and climate resilience program as the vehicles to reach that ambitions. Green economy, net zero emissions, and all those kind of things will be part of this low carbon development and climate resilience programs. And we have already stated this, started from in 2020. We have already included this in our national midterms development plans 2020 to 2024, and we also already include this low carbon development and climate resilience in our Indonesian Vision 2045. Why 2045? That's the 100 years of our independence. So basically, all climate measures, we have already included all climate measures in our development mainstreams right now. And as you can see here in the slides, it is very clearly stated that our national priority number 6, it mentions very clearly that the building the environment, enhancing disaster resilience and climate change has already put as the top priority in our development programs. Next, please. Yeah, and with regards to net zero emissions, certainly this, as Fabi mentioned at the beginning, within the last 6 months, we discussed this net zero emissions quite intensively, and we have already submitted our positions, our submissions, to the UNFCCC that we have targeted for 2060 or sooner. But we have to admit, to reach that ambitions, we need to see what sort of trajectory that we have to follow. What's the trajectory that we have to use for our development in the futures? Of course, our development should be much more greener if we want to reach this net zero ambitions. We have already done our modeling projections, and I think in our modeling projections, there are several policy scenarios that we have to agree among all parties internally in the governments and including our private sectors, because we know that this net zero emissions ambitions cannot just be relied upon the government investment. It should be the private investment should be there as well, and also there are a lot of measures that we have to do. And there are, since this is much more talking about the energy sectors, I would like to emphasize that please, when we talk about net zero emissions, of course, we have to see the whole sectors economic-wide. We just cannot consider only about energy sectors, but land sectors, waste sectors, and even our fiscal sectors, fiscal capacity need to be considered as well. So, with regards to the energy sectors, I really would like to emphasize as well, of course, the renewable energy is one of the top policies if we want to reach this net zero emission ambitions. But I would like to emphasize that the energy efficiency is also cannot be decoupled with renewable energy. I noticed that there are a lot of discussions about renewable energy, but very, very few discussions about energy efficiency. And this is all about demand management. And I think I fully agree with the statement from our German colleagues, from Pak Ulrich, that of course, demand management is very crucial in our energy sectors. I know that in developed countries, yes, demand management is very energy demand management is very crucial. But here in Indonesia, we need to also consider this as well, because according to our modeling projections, this energy demands will soar quite significantly if we do not manage this energy demands quite significantly. And if we do not manage this demand, it is very difficult for us as well to reach this net zero emissions targets. Next, and of course, when we talk about renewable energy, in this discussions, I deliberately take this PLN plans as the one of our scenario. But I know that the scenario is still being discussed, and we haven't come into the conclusions. But the intention is very clear that we gradually would like to reduce the role of coals in our power plant. Yeah, the intention is clear. It's just a matter of how then we could reduce this the roles of coal-fired power plants in our electricity systems. And we need to understand as well how then the base load can also be overcome, whether the battery technology can be expected to make the renewable energy base load can compete with coal-fired power plants, or there are still other scenarios, including as well, there are a lot of the discussion as well about hydrogens, CCS, CCUS, and also how then we can probably, this is still probably, how then we can utilize the nuclear probably, because we don't know. We still need to make sure ourselves that the base load need to be overcome. Of course, we cannot just rely upon the intermittent systems. So this is the kind of thing which is still being discussed, and this is just one of the examples of the commitment from the PLN, and they show very strongly that they would like to reduce the share of the coals in their own power plants. Next, please. And I would like to also emphasize some challenges as well and opportunities here. And of course, when we talk about challenges, we know that to reach net zero ambitions, it is require a huge investment. We have our modeling exercise, and this required almost about, if I'm not mistaken, about 30% of our GDP need to be allocated for this. That's a huge investment. And we need to consider as well about the stranded assets if we would like to go 2060 or sooner. We know that we have already had a kind of agreements, long-term contracts with coal-fired power plants, and we need to understand, but how then we overcome the stranded asset risk, and also how then we can overcome these contractual arrangements if we have to retire the coal power plants sooner rather than the contracts arrangement times. And of course, awareness to transitions to use efficient and environmentally friendly products need to be enhanced as well. Right now we are talking a lot about sustainable public procurements, green procurements, and so on. This also needs to be in line. And one thing which is quite challenges right now, since we are going to go for more green investments, and of course we have to prepare our labor skills from brown to greens as soon as possible, and this is not easy. This requires a lot of efforts to shift the brown jobs to the green jobs in terms of the capacity of our laborers. And certainly green jobs is a big opportunity for us alongside with the green investments, and there are a lot of at the moment there are a lot of initiatives with regards to this to provide this green investment and green jobs. And with regards to decarbonizations, I think there are a lot of efforts as well with on the transportations. We have already produced our presidential regulation. This is we are in the piloting stage at the moment, and right now we are preparing also our carbon pricing regulations, and hopefully these carbon pricing regulations can be implemented as well soon as possible. Next, and as a closing, I would like to underline again that the national economy recovery efforts at the moment, we actually could not just only talk about economic aspects, since we need to prepare our developments as soon as possible once we rest from this COVID-19 impact. So then we really would like to see that our development plan should be sustainable in the futures, and the principle of build back better need to be emphasized in our economic transformation process that we are planning at the moment. And I would like to reiterate again about the importance of low carbon development and climate resilience frameworks as a process, as a platform for us for transitioning our economy into the green economy. And of course, we really would like to have a very good collaborations among with the private sectors, with our partners internationally, and also our academicians as well, to support all these efforts, all these big efforts. Probably that's all that I would like to share with you, all friends and colleagues. Thank you very much. Hand it back over to you, Mbak Lisa.
Terima kasih Pak Medrazam. It's very interesting to see Indonesian strategies to reach net zero emission. Well, I know that it's not in 2050, but I hope by 2045, in Indonesia Vision 2045, we'll see how Indonesia can boost the economy and also reducing emission significantly. I hope you can stay until the end of the session, the discussion today, as I know there may be many questions later on. I will now go on to Pak Basilio. He's going to share on the alignment of energy finance towards net zero economy, mainly from the perspective of investment. Pak Basilio, you may start your presentation now.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon to our friends in Indonesia and our friends from Europe. I'm really delighted to be joining this dialogue today. Oh, I know that this is a war that goes on and on between these countries, and we know that some countries are losing the battlefield and are trying to use some other reasons to win the global war against each other. And for example, we see how the race between Europe and the US to control the world by deploying forces. And we also have the war between Europe and the US to contain the Middle East by forcing Middle East to stop using oil and forcing the Middle East to use or to move to the use of renewable energies. And also now we have this new war against ASEAN countries or countries in Asia, or mainly South countries. I'm talking about China, India, Indonesia, and even including Brazil. And now how these countries between Europe and these countries are trying to put pressure on each other and to fight this war. And now, for example, we see that China, India, and Indonesia are forced to abandon the use of coal, and also, of course, a future of fossil fuel in general. And I'm really delighted to be joining with you today. And being the last speaker, of course, actually, I can just say amen to what other speakers have already expressed during their sessions. But allow me to also share some experience from Indonesia, since I'm not an academician. I'm from the government side. So mostly what I will expose is the experience from Indonesia, how Indonesia is investing, or how Indonesia is aligning itself towards the global commitment for Paris Declaration. Today in Indonesia, we see that Indonesia already has made a commitment for the scenario of zero carbon or net zero by 2060. It was a long discussion between 2050 or 2060 or 2070. But in our formal documents put to COP26, we already stated the contribution of or commitment of 2060. So here we are, and now I'm trying to inform you, of course, completing what Director Medrizel has already explained to us all, but I'm putting it more on practical issues, the experience that Indonesia already embarked on this issue. So by market size, we see the utility in 2060 is about 1,800 terawatt hour. And today, unfortunately, I'm preparing this presentation in Bahasa Indonesia, because I was told that we have translation facilities. So I will, in some slides, I will use English, and some slides I will use Bahasa Indonesia. So for this slide, I will use Bahasa Indonesia. So saat ini produksi listrik adalah 300 terawatt hour, ditambah luncuran 120 terawatt hour dari program 35 gigawatt, sehingga ada ruang 1.380 terawatt hour untuk penambahan kapasitas pembangkit EBT. Mulai tahun 2020 ke depan, porsi kapasitas PLTU diturunkan ya. Dalam grafik bisa lihat ya, proses penurunannya kira-kira seperti apa. Lalu kita juga di Indonesia sudah mulai masuk ke upaya untuk retirement pembangkit dari fosil dimulai tahun 2030, dan secara signifikan turun jumlahnya pada tahun 2040 mengikuti selesainya kontrak pembangkit listrik tersebut. Lalu pembangkit nuklir akan masuk pada tahun 2040 untuk menjaga keandalan sistem seiring perkembangan teknologi nuklir semakin aman. Ya. Lalu phase out seluruh pembangkit PLTU batubara pada tahun 2056 karena sudah tergantikan oleh EBT, mudah-mudahan, insya Allah. Lalu sementara pengembangan pembangkit EBT akan mengalami peningkatan besar-besaran mulai tahun 2028 dikarenakan kemajuan teknologi baterai yang semakin murah kemudian mengalami kenaikan secara eksponensial mulai tahun 2040. Selanjutnya pada tahun 2045, porsi EBT akan porsi EBT sudah mendominasi total pembangkit, dan pada dekade berikutnya seluruh pembangkit listrik diharapkan berasal dari EBT. Ini kira-kira komitmen atau mimpi dari pemerintah Indonesia, sehingga sektor energi akan melakukan rekonfigurasi dengan meningkatkan kapasitas energi terbarukan dan menurunkan kapasitas bahan bakar berbasis fosil untuk memenuhi kebutuhan energi nasional. Nah, tadi lanjut. Tadi waktu Pak Medrizal juga sudah menyampaikan untuk menginformasikan tentang rencana dari PLN ya. Ini adalah slide yang kami pinjam dari PLN yang kira-kira sudah menunjukkan rencana mereka seperti apa sesuai dengan komitmen pemerintah Indonesia sampai 2020. Ya. Jadi ini sudah clear, artinya pemerintah Indonesia atau perusahaan BUMN Indonesia yang ditugaskan untuk menangani listrik paling tidak sudah punya rencana untuk komitmen penuh sampai 2060. Lanjut. Nah, lalu kita lihat bagaimana pengembangan industri hilir di batu bara ya. Misalnya kita lihat Indonesia sudah berkeinginan untuk mewujudkan terbangunnya sejumlah industri hilir batubara skala komersial pada tahun 2030 dengan kapasitas total 37 juta ton. Nah, ini bisa kita lihat beberapa jenis proyek ya yang bisa ada. Kita lihat volume batubara yang akan diolah untuk industri hilir batubara. Misalnya ada gasifikasi batubara, ada UCG, lalu ada coke making, coal upgrading, briquette, lalu pencairan batubara, coal slurry, dan lain-lain. Dan beberapa proyek yang kita lihat, ada 2 pabrik gasifikasi yang sudah tersedia atau terbangun ya. Dua pabrik gasifikasi batubara, 1 pabrik semi-coke making dari tahun 2021, lalu ada pabrik briquette batubara sudah berjalan, lalu ada pabrik coal, 2 pabrik coal upgrading. Lalu kita lihat ada penambahan fasilitas untuk peningkatan nilai tambah juga. Kita lihat ada gasifikasi batubara, kalau ada UCG dari Indominco atau Kideco, lalu ada coke making, coal upgrading, dan lain-lain. Jadi di sini sudah bisa lihat kira-kira pengembangan industri hilir batubara Indonesia ke depan seperti apa. Lanjut. Lalu kita lihat bagaimana Indonesia bisa melakukan komitmennya sampai 2045 untuk low carbon economy. Jadi kita lihat dari segi energi sektor, ya, kita sudah punya energi sektor komitmen, yaitu ada peraturan pemerintahnya. Lalu di national commitment, Indonesia sudah punya NDC by 2030. Lalu kita juga sudah party untuk Paris Declaration, sudah ratifikasi pada tahun 2016, dan juga kita untuk global commitment-nya based on Paris Agreement target long-term goal of keeping the increase of global average temperature to well below 2 centigrades above pre-industrial levels. Jadi di sini sudah bisa kelihatan komitmen Indonesia seperti apa sebagai satu negara yang besar, dan Indonesia juga akan melakukan misalnya bagaimana kita divert the fuel subsidy budget to productive activities, misalnya mengarah ke investasi di infrastruktur. Lalu komitmen 23% renewable energy of the total national primary energy mix by 2025. Ini sudah mulai berjalan. Lalu kita juga punya proyek misalnya bagaimana emisi yang berasal dari waste, municipal waste, bisa kita alihkan menjadi waste to energy, dan semua program ini sudah jalan. Dan untuk sementara ini saya sendiri ditugaskan untuk menangani proyek waste to energy di 12 kota di Indonesia yang memproduksikan sampah di atas 1.000 ton per hari. Lanjut. Nah, Lalu kita lihat bagaimana komitmen dari pemerintah atau bagaimana komitmen dari kepala negara. Kita bisa lihat pernyataan-pernyataan dari Pak Presiden Jokowi sendiri. The energy transformation towards new and renewable energy must be started. Green economy, green technology, and a green product must be strengthened so that we can compete in the global market. Nah, kenapa Presiden menyampaikan pernyataan ini? Karena banyak sekali investasi yang mulai masuk ke Indonesia, tetapi dengan syarat harus menggunakan energi baru terbarukan. Nah, dengan demikian kita bisa lihat bagaimana Presiden Indonesia pada musrembang ya musyawarah nasional musyawarah perencanaan pembangunan nasional di 2021 Presiden sudah membuat pernyataan seperti ini. Lalu di World Climate Summit di April 2022, Presiden juga membuat pernyataan ya, Indonesia is serious in tackling climate change and calls upon the world to take concrete actions. Indonesia itself is currently accelerating net zero emission pilot project, among others, by building the Indonesia Green Industrial Park, covering an area of 12,500 hectares in North Kalimantan Province, which will become the largest in the world. Nah, jadi di sini kita melihat bagaimana Presiden ya betul-betul juga mengikuti komitmen internasional bahwa Indonesia tidak bisa mencapai komitmennya sendiri. Nah, dengan demikian kita memerlukan juga kerjasama dengan negara-negara lain untuk bisa mencapai target sampai 41%. Lanjut. Nah, lalu kita lihat potensi-potensi dan kapasitas untuk energi baru terbarukan yang ada di Indonesia. Kita lihat untuk potensinya ada sekitar 417,8 gigawatt. Itu dari samudra, dari panas bumi, dari bioenergi, dari bayu, dari hidro, dan juga dari surya. Tetapi kita cek satu persatu, untuk samudra itu masih kosong, masih belum ada pengembangannya. Untuk panas bumi sudah lumayan ada, dari total potensi 23, sudah ada 1.000 ya, ada 2.000 ya, 2.000 lebih. Di situ kita lihat 8% lebih. Lalu untuk bioenergi ada 5%. Lalu bayu ada masih kurang dari 1%. Lalu hidro lumayan 8%. Surya masih sangat kecil, ya masih sangat kecil dibandingkan yang lain. Tetapi Indonesia sudah mulai maju ke komitmen untuk pengembangan PLTS ya, atau tenaga surya. Lalu lanjut. Nah, ini kira-kira kita lihat untuk pengembangan EBT menuju 23% ya. Dan untuk bauran energi nasional 2025, kita lihat di 2021 posisinya total capacity ada 63 gigawatt, renewable energy capacity ada 7,9 gigawatt, lalu energy mix itu untuk EBT 13%, lalu target di 2025 itu totalnya 74 gigawatt, renewable energy capacity-nya 17 gigawatt, dan energy mix harapan kita itu bisa mencapai 23%. Dan potensi pengembangan dari 2021 sampai 2030 itu bisa kita lihat seperti tadi ada hidro, lalu ada geothermal, lalu ada renewable energies, dan other base loads, ya, ada juga kontribusinya masing-masing. Lanjut. Nah, khusus untuk PLTS atap, seperti tadi saya sampaikan sebelumnya, untuk tenaga surya ini kontribusi masih sangat kecil, tetapi paling tidak kita Indonesia sudah punya target, misalnya untuk PLTS atap atau rooftop di dalam bahasa Inggris itu targetnya 2.150 gigawatt. Berasal dari mana? Kita coba dari gedung pemerintah, itu 73,25 megawatt, bangunan dan fasilitas milik BUMN, 742 megawatt, kelompok sosial 68,8 megawatt, industri dan bisnis 623,2 megawatt, rumah tangga 48,7 megawatt, dan status per Desember 2020 itu kapasitas terpasangnya baru 21,40 megawatt peak ya, kita kira-kira 3.000 pelanggan lebih. Ini belum banyak, Dan saya melalui kantor saya sekarang sedang mendorong untuk seluruh provinsi bisa mulai mengikuti program ini satu persatu. Dan pada siang hari ini, sore hari ini, jam 4 nanti saya akan juga membantu ada penandatanganan perjanjian kerjasama antara satu pelabuhan di Merak dengan satu perusahaan swasta yang mencoba memasang PLTS rooftop ini di compound mereka. Dan kita juga sudah punya regulasi existing yang dikeluarkan oleh Kementerian SDM itu untuk net metering dan semakin diperbaiki. Dan hari ini, sore ini masih ada diskusi atau pembahasan di Sekretariat Kabinet untuk perubahan dari permen ini, sehingga mungkin ke depan akan lebih baik lagi dan bisa menarik investasi di situ. Dan ini khusus investasi di PLTS atap ini bisa mengurangi emisi gas rumah kaca sampai 3,2 juta ton ya, CO2e ya. Lanjut. Nah, lalu untuk program pengembangan PLTS skala besar, kalau yang tadi skala kecil, skala besar itu kita targetnya ada 10 gigawatt, dan misalnya di Pulau Sumba itu ada satu pulau yang dekat atau di Nusa Tenggara Timur, dan di situ kita ada rencana 2 gigawatt di situ, dan bundling dengan interkoneksi 500 kafe ke Jawa. Kalau intermittensi dapat diredam dengan PLTGU dan PLTA di Jawa yang cukup besar. Nah ini kalau misalnya ada investor yang tertarik untuk investasi untuk PLTS di NTT ini, di Sumba ini, welcome, kami bisa bantu. Karena ini sekarang Indonesia pun sekarang sedang mencoba bagaimana bisa mendompleng energinya dengan usulan dari Australia yang ingin memasang kabel listrik dari Australia sampai ke ASEAN. Kita Indonesia sedang mencoba untuk membangun di Pulau Sumba ini untuk kemudian bisa listriknya disalurkan melalui kabel yang sama. Ini rencana. Ya. Lalu PLTS di Kalimantan Barat yang dikombinasikan dengan import listrik dari Sabah sampai 1 gigawatt. Lalu PLTS di bekas lahan tambang timah di Bangka Belitung dan PLTS terapung di Singkarak ya, yang diharapkan sampai 1 gigawatt. Dan juga PLTS yang akan dibangun di bekas area pertambangan, lahan tidak produktif, dan pemanfaatan waduk. Nah ini kira-kira beberapa contoh investasi yang mungkin bisa menarik atau menjadi tertarik bagi pihak-pihak yang berminat di bidang-bidang ini. Lanjut. Nah ini kita misalnya ada satu project kick-off ceremony untuk PLTS terapung di Cirata itu tanggal 17 Desember 2020. Dan PLTS terapung Cirata ini kapasitasnya 145 megawatt dan akan menjadi PLTS terapung terbesar di ASEAN. Ini mungkin adalah contoh pertama untuk kita. Lanjut. Lalu untuk potensi pengembangan PLTS terapung di waduk atau di danau yang sudah ada PLTA, itu bisa kita lihat ada di Sumatera ada 3 lokasi, di Kalimantan 3 lokasi itu menyumbang 7 lebih megawatt. Di Kalimantan itu ada 1 lokasi menyumbang 26 kilowatt. Di Sulawesi ada 6 lokasi akan menyumbang 2.000 lebih megawatt. Di Jamali itu 13 lokasi itu akan menyumbang hampir 2.000 megawatt. Lalu di MPNT itu akan di 5 lokasi akan menyumbang kira-kira 39 lebih megawatt ya. Nah ini kira-kira kita lihat betapa besarnya. Lanjut. Nah, lalu untuk transisi energi menuju energi bersih, itu percepatan pengembangan EBT tetap mempertimbangkan realitas kebutuhan energi, keekonomian yang wajar, dengan memberikan kesempatan pertama kepada energi terbarukan, dan meminimalkan intermitensi faktor. Nah, ini misalnya untuk percepatan EBT, kita lihat ada substitusi energi primer final, tetap menggunakan existing teknologi seperti misalnya B30, co-firing, pemanfaatan biomas, lalu konversi energi primer dari fosil, terjadi penggantian teknologi pembangkit konversi dari PLTD atau PLTU digantikan dengan PLT EBT, biogas dan pellet untuk memasak. Lalu ada penambahan kapasitas EBT untuk memenuhi demand baru, fokus pada PLTS. Lalu pemanfaatan EBT non-listrik, non-BPM, BPN seperti briket dan pengeringan produk pertanian biogas. Lalu juga misalnya kita juga masuk ke rencana kendaraan listrik, motor listrik dan lain-lain. Dan juga untuk efisiensi energi, itu misalnya akan ada total pengamatan kumulatif sampai Desember 2020 sebesar 56,6 juta setara BBM-nya. Nah, dan pencapaian pengurangan emisi CO2 kumulatif sampai Desember 2020 sebesar 64,35 juta ton CO2. Nah, ini kira-kira bagaimana kita menyiapkan diri menuju transisi menuju energi bersih. Lanjut. Nah, ini kita lihat bagaimana ada oversupply dari pembangkit energi listrik ya. Evaluasi dari RUPTL 2019-2028 sampai dengan April 20. Ini kita lihat penjualan energi kira-kira seperti apa. Kita lihat di Sumatera rencana RUPTL 2020 kita lihat realisasinya rendah, lalu di Bali, Jawa Bali, Nusra juga realisasi semua kita lihat memang realisasinya untuk pemanfaatan energi listriknya masih rendah ya. Nah, lalu berikutnya lanjut. Nah, ini bagaimana kita juga mencoba mencapai komitmen kita melalui pengurangan impor dari BBM ya. Itu juga adalah upaya kita ya, bagaimana kita bisa mengarah ke situ. Nah, itu misalnya kita lihat ya tahun 2030 itu kilang tambahan 1 baru dan ada 4 pengembangan produksi solar disesuaikan dengan kebutuhan. Lalu BBG kita lihat ada 440.000 kendaraan, lalu 257 unit kapal, butuh insentif penyesuaian harga BBG. Lalu ini kira-kira komitmen misalnya sekarang saya sendiri di Menko Maritim itu mendorong Pertamina untuk bisa memproduksi low sulfur marine fuel oil untuk bisa untuk bisa supply kepada 200.000 kapal asing yang melalui di perairan kita setiap tahun. Nah, ini kemudian bisa kita lihat dengan Indonesia bisa berkontribusi di produksi low sulfur oil, nanti mungkin oil yang sama bisa dipakai oleh kapal-kapal nasional juga. Dengan demikian, kontribusi Indonesia dan juga pengamatan devisa negara juga bisa lebih banyak ke depan. Nah, ini kira-kira Bapak Ibu sekalian beberapa perkembangan atau lebih sifatnya sebagai informasi yang dapat saya share pada pertemuan kita pada hari ini. Sekian dari saya kembali.
Terima kasih Pak Basilio. Informasinya sangat menarik sekali. Mungkin karena Pak Basilio harus segera ke meeting selanjutnya. Mudah-mudahan nanti kalau ada pertanyaan saya bisa sampaikan melalui email ke Pak Basilio untuk bisa dapat input atau komennya ya Pak.
Tapi Mbak Lisa nggak apa-apa, saya ada di sini ada Pak Rida. Kalau ada pertanyaan yang disampaikan nanti bisa dibantu dari Pak Rida.
Oke, baik. Terima kasih banyak Pak Basilio. Ya, terima kasih. Baik. Everyone, sorry, just to switch from Indonesian language to English. Pak Basilio has to leave to another meeting, and we'll have Pak Rida representing him to answer questions for today's discussion. We have got some questions already in the chat box. And I think I would like to first ask Pak Medrozam for the questions. I think it's really related to Indonesia's NDC. First of all is the questions from Daniel asking about Indonesia NDC. He says that there seems to be miscounting or misinformation in the Indonesia's current NDC. and in which the actual emission in 2030 might be below than the projected emission. So what do you think, or what's your comment on this? And also, I guess Daniel also wants to know on how each country, not only Indonesia, but also maybe in Germany, in South Korea, in Japan, consider a baseline year and also the targeted year to reach the net zero emission. So first of all, I will like to ask Pak Medrazam to answer, and then if from the office of Mr. Ulrich can say something, then we'll go on to Jujin and Kentaro. Please, Pak Medrazam.
Okay, thank you very much, Bu Lisa, and thanks for Pak Daniel. I'm not quite clear where actually the mistakes here. I have tried to understand the chats that has already written here, but what I would like to underline is that Indonesia still commits with the 29 with our Paris Agreement targets, and I would like to underline as well that when we talk about the share of the emissions and the trajectory, and I think that's very dynamics. Yeah, that's very dynamics. In particular, after we experience this COVID-19, that's completely very dynamics at the moment. And but we still make sure that our Paris Agreement target can be achieved. And if I look at again our record in our potential emission reduction, that I would like to urge you as well to see our Aksara homepage. Here in our Aksara homepage, I think you can see actually how's the progress of our emission reductions potentially based on government interventions. We haven't included our private intervention there in our Aksara homepage, but you can see there that how the governments actually provide how the government efforts actually to reduce the emission reductions. And so far, it has already reached almost the 26%, almost reached 26% in our 2020. But again, that's very dynamics in 2021 and 2022. We will actually, we still try to record it. But I think what we might to understand that the our Paris agreements actually really still become our main targets at the moment before any new announcements by our president. We'll see whether we could improve this or increase the targets, but we still try to in line with this at the moment, and we'll still also try to reach our ambitions in the 2060. But again, I would like to reassure that this is very dynamic in terms of the trajectory. So it could be down and up and then down, but it depends on our economic situation as well. It depends on our COVID-19 situations. There are a lot of conditions right now that we have to consider about all these new big efforts to reduce these emissions.
Okay, but I know it's ups and downs in terms of trajectory. But do you see that Indonesia can consistently leveling up our economic growth?
Yeah.
And okay, all right.
Yeah, Bu Lisa, actually up and down, but the behavior, the trend is actually we'll try to reduce it. At the end of the day, it has to be zero. But of course, during the course, the up and down, that might possibly happen. But of course, the trend should be declining. The long-term trend should be declining. I see all colleagues in Japan's and also in the South Koreans projections. It's like a straight line, right? But of course, if we try to make it real, there has to be an up and down during between the straight lines. So that's the reality that we have to consider as well, and it will depend on our economy, our COVID progress, and all those kind of things.
Okay, thank you, Pak, for your comment. I would like to hear from Jujin and Kentaro, since I think our counterparts from German is no longer here. So perhaps Jujin can please provide your comments.
Yes. Thank you. This is a relevant question to the BAU. I think the question here is about whether Indonesia should use a absolute figure-based target or a BAU minus certain percentage target. We also had that discussion, and we no longer use a BAU-based target anymore. I heard that, but this may not be correct, but I heard that Ban Ki-moon, former UN Secretary General, had a discussion with our President Moon Jae-in, I think maybe a couple of years ago, on climate, and President Moon Jae-in was told Ban Ki-moon that he was very proud that that we're no longer using the BAU-based target. That's a story, the anecdote I heard. It may not be correct, but our president clearly knows what a BAU target is, and that it's not the best thing to do.
All right. So what about in Japan, Kentaro?
Thank you very much. I think Japan has an absolute target. We don't have a BAU target, so we can share our experience. But basically, this kind of overestimation of BAU is always a problem. Well, not only Indonesia, but also any other country which adopted BAU target. So that's why, current Paris Agreement requires some information which related to the, how to calculate a BAU, and information will be updated or not. That kind of information needed to provide it to improve transparency of this BAU calculation. So, and also basically Paris Agreement encourage all parties to shift from BAU target to absolute target in the long term. So I think I understand that many developing countries adopted the BAU countries for specific reasons, but in terms of clarity of this target, I think gradually developing countries also requested or encouraged to move to the absolute target in the future. Especially if the these developing countries set net zero target in the long term, I think it's time for those countries to shift to absolute target. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks a lot for your explanation. Now I'd like to ask another question. I think this is for Pak Medril and Pak Rida from the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Investment. So in terms of the stranded assets, so Japan and South Korea has announced to end overseas coal financing. And of course, Indonesia as one of the top coal producers will be impacted. So is there any stranded asset risk that you may foresee? Is there any strategies towards that global initiatives to transition from fossil fuel to non-fossil fuel? And I think these are only two questions. And the third question for Pak Medril, is Indonesia considering for a just transition in the long-term strategy? So yeah, perhaps I would like Pak Medril and Pak Rida to answer these two questions for Pak Rida and three questions for Pak Medril.
Pak Rida dulu deh, biar kedengeran suaranya Pak Rida.
Oke, Pak Rida, please Pak Rida.
Masih di mute.
Pak Rida, ya.
Mikrofonnya di mute tuh.
Yeah. Maybe my colleague, can talk. Okay.
Yeah, I was unable earlier. Thank you. Terima kasih Pak Medril. Mohon maaf tadi saya close video karena paralel sama Bu Agustin dan juga sama Seknek sambil dengarkan Pak Deputi. So thank you. Regarding the stranded asset and the related issues, I have not seen one by one of Deputy's presentation earlier, but we prepared that for him. It was including the strategies for downstreaming of the coal, whatever is possibly not going to be used towards the end of the net zero targets, and so we can do gasification and we can do other strategies to still utilize our remaining coal that are still underground or something. In terms of the coal power generating units, I believe they will see the end of their terms within 2060, hopefully. If not, yeah, maybe we can make some case towards this is the last units. I don't think we should have a problem with that, because the more we do better business towards generating with renewable energy in a very large scale towards the future, I think all those costs would we should be able to cover those costs, especially that we know right now the fact is we have not been optimizing all the possible economic potential that we have in Indonesia. We still have huge potential to dig up and what do we call that? Industrialize our fisheries industries, our tourism industries. So many potential around the archipelagic areas that we have. So many islands to look at, so many islands to visit and do businesses at, and when we talk about this island geography, the best option is to do the renewable energy for all possible businesses or economic activities that we can create in each of the locations. So there's so much potential, even though we do the coal power in regular term right now. We continue as planned. If we can push toward optimizing all these other potentials, this coal section of our energy would be small enough after we optimizing all the economic potentials from the rest of whatever abundant potential we have in Indonesia. So if we want to make this dirty power become a small portion of our generation section, so we could enlarge our economic activities supported by the renewable energy potential that we have unlimited resources of. That's the main idea behind it. It just depends on how we can manage this and how we can not putting hurdles in our own ways. Or many can say, if we don't shoot ourselves in the foot while trying to reach our targets. So if we could manage to do that, hopefully this dirty fossil businesses should not be a problem. I think that's probably we could add at this point. If there's a further question, I will be happy to reply. Thank you.
Mbak Lisa masih mute gitu.
So mute, Mbak Lisa. Yeah.
Oh, ganti ya. Yeah, I'm so sorry ya. Yeah, thank you Pak Rida. Please go ahead Pak Bedrazam.
Okay. Yep. Thank you very much, Mbak Lisa. And I think with regards to the questions on the stranded asset, I think if you look at again, the presentations, the slide from me and also from Basilio with regards to the way our national electricity company, our PLN, try to shift gradually from coals to non-coals resource. Yeah, and this happens, of course, not just through in 2 or 3 or 5 years, but it will be gradually changed or shift in a more longer term. So in terms of transition, this is what we call a very just transitions. Of course, we have to consider about all the risks that the PLN has to cover, and also the risk the country as well that has to cover. So that's why when we talk about the stranded assets, if we talk in the horizon on the target of 2060, I think the risk of stranded assets can be eliminated. But when we talk about sooner, from the 2060, the stranded asset then become a big challenges. And I think so that's why the government at the moment still think that the 2060 in a more appropriate targets to reach our net zero emissions. And of course, we just cannot stand alone if we have to anticipate with the issue of the stranded risk. We have to work together to collaborate with other developed countries in how then we tackle this issue. We just cannot cover all the burden to us. Yeah, of course we have to share our burden as well with all colleagues with developed countries if we want to go more sooner rather than 2060. And again, even for 2060, I have already mentioned that the very huge investments that we have to cover, and we really would like to invite the investors from developed countries to invest in a more greener way in Indonesia, so then we can also improve our green jobs markets. So then our development will be much more greener compared to the previous. So that's probably that I would like to share, Lisa.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, a follow-up question. So ISR has done research and that actually Indonesia can phase out coal as early before 2050. And I think our colleague Kentaro just mentioned about the interest of Japan to invest in Southeast Asia in terms of supporting hydrogen and ammonia. So I would like to ask your comments, Pak Medril and Pak Rida, whether first, what do you think about our Indonesia goal to phase out coal before 2050? And are we ready if Japan, for example, invests in Indonesia for hydrogen and ammonia? And what would be the challenges that that will be hampered to grow the renewable energy deployment in Indonesia as we reach our vision, Indonesia Vision 2045? And I don't think it's not long from now. It's just like time passed by very fast. So I think we should be work faster from now. So please, Pak Medril or Pak Rida, if you have comments.
Yeah. Lisa, thank you very much. Certainly, we are very happy to welcome any investments from all colleagues here from developed countries on our green energy, whether this hydrogens or of course the solar power and all those kind of things. But again, we need to consider as well if we want to pursue that the coal fire plant should be retired soon as possible. Of course, we have to share the risk to also other countries, because this is not an easy issue for Indonesia. And I think we discussed this quite intensively as well with our PLN. They told us that a very significant amount of fine that we have to cover if we breach the contracts, if we speed up all this coal-fire plants retirement. So sharing risk I think if we want to push further, I think the risk sharings among countries need to be considered as well. And I think, but again, we are very welcome in any kind of renewable investments to be developed in Indonesia, and that will be part of our scenario planning as well for our net zero emission targets. Thank you, Matis.
Rida, if you have comments, and then we'll go to Jujin. Jujin raised hand.
Farida, please. Masih mute.
Yes, maybe our team is now helping him.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I was not allowed earlier. Thank you. Yes, it is interesting when we talk about new generations of technologies, and as the name suggests, it is a new generation of technology. It should have its own complete infrastructure to be feasible. It should need to have a good size or appropriate size of application to make it feasible. So the good thing about applying new technologies in Indonesia, with the given geographic facts that we have so many islands, we could pick and choose clusters of where we could apply this, of which islands is a good size to apply hydrogen technology for the whole island, for example. And we need to grow a good size of businesses to make it feasible, either with hydrogen or with the ammonia. And we could always have that options in Indonesia. It's only about making it feasible, making sure that the investment will produce benefits for both sides, the investors and also the country itself. And I don't think we have a problem of applying technologies or new technology, even new technologies. The only problem is making it feasible and making sure that it is beneficial for all sides. I think Indonesia is open. Indonesia have so many resources on the supply side of the production, or supply side of the economic activities, or at the production side, or at the downstream of the economic activities. So it's just about making it feasible and beneficial. I think applying those new technologies in Indonesia, we have all kinds of options, all kind of combination we can choose from. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Rida. Please, Jujin, if you have comments on that.
Yes, thank you. Since investments to Indonesia has been mentioned, I think it might be good to mention what I hear from the Korean financial institutions about investing in countries like Indonesia in renewable projects. They usually say that they would be more than willing to go to countries like Indonesia for renewable investments. The problem they have is that the pricing packages or the grid access requirements provided by the Indonesian power sector makes it difficult to meet their requirements for financing, whereas the pricing packages for coal power is just so good. So I think that is an issue that has to be resolved for the money to flow into Indonesia. The money is definitely there, and it's been going into the wrong sectors. I think coal wasn't the right way to go. Another related discussion that is happening in Korea related to the potential of solar curtailments and the grid balancing is that whether the national utility of Korea, so it is KEPCO, has been providing fair access to the power grid, because if KEPCO allows more access of renewable projects into the power grid, what will lose, the power plants that will lose money, is its own coal power plants or its own gas power plants. So there is kind of like a conflict of interest situation here, and whether this is a right situation is becoming a topic that is being discussed in Korea. And I think in Europe, or in the US, this discussion eventually led to the conclusion of unbundling the grid. And I think the discussions in Korea in the near future will lead to that way as well. So that I think is another discussion that is emerging here in Korea. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jujin. Pak Medr or Pak Rida, do you have any comments on what Jujin said about the policy that more support coal than renewables in Indonesia?
Pak Medr, want to go first or?
Pak Rida duluan, Pak. Silakan. Sorry, saya lagi ada sesuatu juga ya.
Oke, silakan Pak. Thank you. Saya duluan, Pak. So yes, I will be honest with you in terms of we have to accept that Indonesia has been around for a while, and we have businesses that have been established themselves in Indonesia. The stronger the establishments, the stronger their influence on or the stronger their influence towards the business or decision making that the country has to do. And so we have to keep that in mind. We cannot, this is a democratic country, and we have certain regulations that's already agreed by all parties. So we have to keep that in mind. If we can push against strong establishments, we could try to do so. Or like I mentioned earlier, I was opening the way to go to less travel path or less beaten path. Go to the fisheries industries in all other 11 or 12,000 islands that are not yet optimized. All kinds of fisheries business, all kinds of tourism businesses can be started there, and we could use renewable energy. Even renewable energy even is the best options in that areas. So, or you guys could do both, push towards going against the establishments, or also doing, little by little accumulate your credit files in those so many little islands, and maybe your influence going to get stronger in going against the stronger establishments that are already around for so many years in Indonesia. So consider that, and we from the government will help whatever we could, improve our regulations, update our regulations, and back up or support towards our own targets that we stated already by ourselves. We will support the programs that we determined earlier, and we will impose regulations that we created to support these targets that we determined. And we also are what is that again? We are committed to targets that our presidents already stated. All the 23% of renewable energy by 2025. We are committed to reach that, to get to that point as much as we could. And if the investments, I understand that investment likes to go to the big potentials, but it's already, but it is also been occupied by a lot of previous businesses that have been around for a while. There are some are friendly to renewable energy or to the new technologies. Some are not. They like they like the fact that they are established, like internal combustion engine. It's not going to be easy in Indonesia. It's not going to be that easy in many countries either. So it's just the fact that we need to keep in mind. We just need to go around it if we don't have yet that big of a power to go against them. So I think we can work around that, or we can work together, seeing, like I mentioned earlier, Indonesia has so many potentials. Indonesia has so many locations that are not yet being optimized in terms of its economic potential. So we could work together on any of them. And like I said, if we want to try to create even hydrogen or ammonia technologies in Indonesia, we just pick one location, make it feasible all the way we could. And nobody will come and distract our projects, because it is just separate. It will be standalone by itself. It's just left to us to make it feasible. We do whatever potentials that the location we choose has, and we do how big or how much hydrogen or ammonia production that we need to create in the location to support all the economic activities that we can create at the location. So it's so open. Indonesia is so open. It's just about us making it happen. That's it. Thank you. Masih.
Ya, Pak Medril, ya, if you have any comments.
Saya kira sudah lengkap. I think Pak Rida has already a very complete answer for the questions. And I'm so sorry I have to leave now because the minister just called me. So sorry, I have to leave. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Thank you very much, Pak Medril Zam.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot for being here until 4:30. Yeah, we are running out of time actually. Just if I may ask one comments from our audience to Pak Rida, and then we close our sessions today. It's about the coal downstream industry. If it's considered as the same stranded assets raised as the coal industry in general, if Pak Rida can answer the question from Hadi.
Could you repeat that again, please?
So the question is, if the coal downstream is seen as a solution to prevent stranded assets, and whether the race will be the same as the general coal industry, because the commerciality is still questionable, and the need for various incentives and even the possibility of subsidies has not been considered.
Yeah, Pak Medril touched on that. It depends on when are we going to do it.
Pak Rida, you have any comments on that?
Yes. Yeah, thank you. I will repeat. Pak Medril has touched on that a little bit, that it would depend on when we are going to do it. When we know we have to stop all this coal generations, if we already know when, and then we put all the variables together and we decide how to do it, we just have to deal with whatever variables we have in hands, and then we just pick and choose what the best combinations to make it work. We have technologies available to do the downstreaming of the coal industries, and also we can continue letting our coal generation see it end of terms if we can do it up until 2060. So it just depends on when we're going to do this, and we decide whatever we have in hand. So we create the best combination or best equations to give us the most benefits out of what we have in hand. I think that should be what the solution is. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thanks a lot for all our speakers today. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to discuss everything in details. Tomorrow we'll have a second session, a discussion on stranded assets. We'll be discussing with various stakeholders in Indonesia to discuss about coal exit and stranded assets in Indonesia. So I think now we are coming to the end of the session, I would like to ask Pak Fabi to have a summary or closure of our discussion today, and then we can end our session today.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank to all panelists, especially in here, Pak Basilio and Pak Rida Yasser, and also Pak Medril Sam from Indonesia. I know you are very busy right now, and there is a lot of meetings currently ongoing. As I mentioned earlier, that the discussion on net zero emission in Indonesia picked up in the last few months, and we have seen that actually that Indonesian government is committed. Well, all of this, but also we should understand that this is quite new, right? And the number of, well, even the understanding about the net zero emission and its complexities and the consequences to the country still has to be understood properly, right? Because we are about to change the economic structure for good. So I think with that, I understand that we still to do a number of a study to understand about this phenomena and where we need to go. As Farida mentioned, that we still have to think carefully, look at carefully how our energy system will evolve, and also what is the consequences to that. And as Indonesia also is a fossil fuel rich resources country, we have a plenty of coal. Looking at the implication to the coal sectors, not only power plant, is also something very, very important. Today's discussion highlight that the importance that we make a plan on our energy transition and look at the implications to it and prepare to address all the consequences of this transition. It's not easy task, but I think through the cooperation, partnership, learning from other countries, other sectors, how they can do that, the transition successfully, I think, is a must for Indonesia. With that, I would like to end this session by also would like to thank to all participants that stay until this hour, and I hope to see you all tomorrow. That's in the second session that we're going to discuss more, hopefully have in-depth discussion on the impact of coal exit and stranded asset. Thank you very much and have a good day. Back to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Pak Fabi. Again, I would like to thank everyone to be here and also my teams to help in holding this event. Tomorrow, we are going to have another discussion at 2 p.m. Please don't forget to sign up for the discussion tomorrow. My team can help to share the information in the chat box. Thanks again, everyone, and see you tomorrow, and stay safe. Bye-bye.